Hey everyone, I'm going to show you today how to design a sneeze guard, which are kind of unfortunately a lot of people are needing to have made for public places nowadays. I'm going to show you how to design one and create G-code for it for your machine using both the Fabber software and VCarve or Aspire. We're going to be designing these things in SketchUp, but the concepts you'll learn here you can apply to just about any CAD program, whether you're using Onshape or Fusion 360, Aspire or VCarve or anything else. So this is pretty basic modeling. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with a new SketchUp model here. But one of the things you want to do before you even start making anything is you want to get some material and you want to measure it. Here's why. This is 1/4 inch polycarbonate. I get these in 4x8 sheets. And as you can see here, I've got a caliper on it, but the thickness is 0.211. It is not 0.25. So even though these are listed and sold as 1/4 inch thick or 0.25 inch thick, almost all the time with most sheet goods, including plywood, when you get them in, they are typically thinner than their advertised thickness. And they can vary a little bit from sheet to sheet. So you're going to want to definitely get the material in hand and check it with a caliper before you start modeling. So once you have those numbers, you can go in here, and so let's say we need a 24 by 36 inch guard. So I'm going to start with a rectangle. By the way, I'm going to be showing how to do this in SketchUp. This is not going to be an exhaustive tutorial on how to use SketchUp as a beginner. The tools I'm going to be using here are very basic SketchUp tools. What I would highly recommend doing if you are new to SketchUp, this is going to be a great thing just to watch to kind of get an idea of what SketchUp can do. And for some really good tutorials, SketchUp's YouTube channel has some excellent tutorials. All the basic tutorials will get you more than the skills you need to do what we're doing here. So I'm going to kind of breeze over the SketchUp tools because really this is about the overall process of designing something in CAD and creating G-code. So I'm going to take a rectangle here in SketchUp, and I'm going to make it 24 by 36 inches. And actually, 36 by 24 inches. I got it going this way. And this basic rectangle is representing the overall size of the guard that I want. Now, if you look at our completed guard here, you can see that there is a gap underneath. I recommend doing these things so if you have kind of an uneven counter or something like that, it doesn't rock on there, and then it just gives people more space to like slide papers or pens or whatever they need underneath. So in SketchUp, what you can do is you can take the tape measure tool and you can click on a line like this and type in 1 inch. So now I've established a line there, and I can take my move tool and just move that up an inch. So I've kind of made this shorter by 1 inch, and we'll keep that in mind as we model. And these guidelines you can delete if you like as you go along. Now I'm going to make the slot that goes in the middle. So I'm going to use the tape measure tool again, pull a parallel line off the side, and if you run along the bottom of a line like this, it'll snap to the midpoint. This is very similar to how snaps work in like VCarve or Aspire too. So I've got the midpoint, and I'm going to offset a line here. Let's say I want that transaction slot 4 inches high, but we're an inch off the ground, so I'm going to make it 3 inches. And now I want the transaction slot 6 inches wide, so I'm going to go 3 on this side and 3 on this side. And so you can see those guidelines have given me a nice sort of template to trace out with lines. So I'll just take the line tool, and it'll snap here, snap here, snap here, snap here. Very easy to do. And now you can see in SketchUp, if I click here, I've got a face that sort of represents this, and then a face that represents the piece that I want to have be milled away. So I'll just take the erase tool and erase this line here. We can erase these guidelines. And you can see here, we're very quickly starting to get the shape of the guard that I want. Now, what we're going to need is, you can see how these things fit together here. There's sort of two slots that interact with each other. And I'm going to want to draw these in to our big sheet, and then we're going to make our little winged parts here. So let's start with putting the slots on the big piece here. And to do that, I am going to, again, take my trusty tape measure tool, click and release, and just pull out on here. You want to make sure it's going along the red axis. That means it's sort of sliding along, the face of our guard here. And I'm going to kind of eyeball this. And if you look up in my toolbar here in the top, I've got the length. In your SketchUp, it's probably down in the bottom right-hand corner. I've moved mine up here so it's a little easier to see. But I'm going to eyeball that, and it's about at 4 inches right now. That looks pretty good, so I'm just going to type in 4 and press enter. And I'm going to do the same thing here because I want this symmetrical. And then I'm going to start establishing the slot. So I'm going to make this slot a little bit more than the width of the thickness of the material. So I'm going to go back to this here. We remember that this material is 0.211 thick. And it can vary across the sheet, probably on acrylic and polycarbonate, not too much, but it can vary. And you're going to want these things a little bit wider than the thickness of the material. You want them to fit together with a little bit of resistance, but you don't want people jamming these things in there, having to pound them in, and especially if it's acrylic, that stuff can be brittle. You don't want to ship these off to somebody and have them break them when they're trying to put them together. So we're going to go to about 0.22. We're going to try that. So I'm going to make this line 0.22 like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to go kind of on the inside here like this, 0.22. And then I'm going to establish a line up here. And let's say I want this slot to be 3 inches deep like that. And so now I can kind of do the same trick that I've done here and make the slots. We'll go over here with the line tool. And we'll go up like this, go over. And so now I don't need these guidelines anymore. And you saw me earlier, you can use the erase tool to remove the guidelines. There's another trick in SketchUp too. You can go to edit and you can go to delete guides, and this will just remove all of the guides from your models. That's a little bit faster of a way to do it. So I'm going to use the erase tool and erase this line here. And I'm going to erase this line here. And so now you can see we've got, kind of the rough mock-up of what this thing is going to look like, and we got to add a little bit more detail into it. On my model, I put in the dog bones that you're going to need because round bits don't make hard corners, so you're going to need to account for that. And I like to put those right in my 3D model just so they're there. It's kind of the source of truth. You don't have to worry about putting them in your CAM program. So we're going to put those in. Now, we know that this slot is just under 1/4 inch, and you can check that if you want to check your dimensions as you go along by using the tape measure. So I'll click here, and you can see right on the tooltip, this is 0.22 inches. So we need a dog bone that is going to account for the size bit that we're going to use. And in this case, I would probably use an 1/8 inch bit. They're pretty common bits. I have a lot of them around. So I'm going to use the arc tool. This is the classic 2-point arc in SketchUp. And I'm just going to click here and then move the mouse pointer a distance down here. It doesn't really matter. And type in 0.13. And if you zoom in a little bit and you kind of, sometimes you need to get in sort of close here. Let's try that again. I think we're a little bit zoomed out. 0.13, which is a little bit over the diameter of the bit. And okay, so this is something that can happen in SketchUp, and what I'm trying to do is make a half circle here, and it's not working. You can see it's kind of snapping like this. And if you look up at my toolbar, you can see the bulge is 0.125. And so what I have going on here is I have length snapping set to 1/8 inch. You can actually turn this off or turn it down. So if I go to Window, Model Info, and I go to Units, this is where you would set your drawing units. So mine were already set in inches. Yours may be set in feet. You could change these if you want. You can change them anytime when you're modeling. You don't have to do it at the beginning of a model. You can do it like we're doing here, right in the middle. But you can see I have length snapping set at 1/8 inch. So I'm just going to turn this off and go back, and I'm going to try that arc again. So I'm going to say 0.13. And then we're going to go out. And that's what I wanted. See how it kind of snaps and it's this half circle? This is what I want. And I'll show you why in a second here. So I'm going to do the same thing. And SketchUp will kind of snap here. It'll say, hey, we saw that you did a 0.13 last time. It'll sort of snap at the same length again. And we'll go like this. And it'll snap at half circle. And there we go. Now I'm going to take the erase tool and erase these. And the reason why I did 1.3 is I measure from here to here, it's 1.3. That is a little bit over the diameter of an 1/8 inch bit. And that means when you're cutting this, the bit's going to go in and it's going to run around this corner and come out without slowing down as much as it would as if it were exactly the diameter of the bit. If it were exactly the diameter of the bit, this cut would still work, but the bit would come up and it would go in and it would kind of stop, and then it would go over here and it would kind of stop, and then it would come back out. It wastes a little bit of time, and in some cases it can kind of melt the material a little bit if your feed and speed isn't quite on point. So that's what I like to do. I typically make these things a little bit bigger than the bit. So we'll do the same thing here, arc tool, and again you can see it's just snapping at 1.3, half circle, snaps at 1.3, goes to half circle. So, if you're new to SketchUp, you see it's pretty helpful in terms of, letting you kind of redo the same thing over and over again. Now, you'll notice here that this shield's got a lot of rounded corners on it. That's to make it, kind of easy, easy in people's hands, easy to assemble, things like that. So we are going to set that up as well. So I'm going to do corners and the outer edges here first. And the way I do those, I like them to all be the same. And so you can take the arc tool in SketchUp and you can make an arc like this, and it will actually round off your corner for you. But it's hard to make that an exact radius. And you can sometimes go back in here and change the radius, and it will let you do that, which is not a bad way to do it. In fact, let's do it this way, just for fun. So we'll go, and I'll show you how I'm doing this here. So I'm going to make an arc, and we want it to be purple because that's tangent, and you double click, and it will round off the corner, and we'll go here, and we'll make sure it goes purple, double click, make sure it goes purple, double click, and we're going to do here too, make sure it goes purple, double click, make sure it goes purple, double click. It's worth noting this trick that I'm doing only works when you have a flat kind of 2D model like I have here. This will not work this way on a 3D. You can still put an arc in, but it's not going to do this sort of automatic rounding off like I'm doing here. Oops, got that one backwards. So we'll just hit undo, and we'll click our arc tool again, and there we go. Now, you will notice that these arcs are not all equal, and I want them to be all equal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on one of these and do Entity Info. And this is like a properties box, and you can kind of change properties of certain things in SketchUp. So right now, this one has a radius of 1/2 inch. I like that. If I click this arc here, this one's really big, so I'm just going to make that 1/2 inch. And we'll go over here. We'll click this one. Make it 1/2 inch, and we'll make this one 1/2 inch, and let's see if we can do two at once. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try it. Nope, we can't. So we'll just click on this one. Let's make this a 1/4 inch radius. There we go. And that'll make it easy for people to put their leg in there. So I like this at 0.5. I like this one at 0.5. I like this one at 0.5. And I like this one at 0.5. And we just got to do these two here, and we are done making these. 2.5. And hopefully you all haven't fallen asleep. And there we go. Okay, so it's probably worth, at this point, making sure that you save your model. Call this webinar shield. Probably should have saved it in the beginning. Now it's time to make this one 3D. So we're going to use our push-pull tool. And I'm going to click and release and start moving this up. And I'm going to say 0.211. which is the actual thickness of our material. And then I'm going to select the whole thing. You can either click drag to select like that, or click it 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and that will select all of the parts. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to say make component. And this is going to bring up this dialog box. I'm going to call this main shield. The name doesn't really matter. It pops up in some of the programs you export to. So if you do want to name it to keep organized, you can do that. Do make sure that replace selection with component is checked. Normally it is checked. And set component axes, it's actually correct here. So we don't need to do anything with that. And critically, you want the blue axis pointing up. I'll actually drop a link to a video that has a little bit more detail on this, and we're going to talk about it when we make some other parts anyway. So we're going to hit create. And there we go. So we've got our part. Now, we're going to stand this thing up vertically, and we're going to make the legs for it. So you can stand it up a couple different ways. I like to do, in this case, the rotate tool, because this is made on the ground. And so with it selected, still selected here, I'm going to click the rotate tool. And I'm just going to find a line along the bottom. Anywhere here, it doesn't matter. If you click and drag, it will, the direction you drag rotates the rotate tool. And if you get it along the bottom, you can click there. I like to click out on the side like this, and then you can rotate it. And if you look up in the measurement box in the top of my screen there, you'll see the angle is 90 degrees. Click again, and it stays there. And again, a lot of this stuff, this is very basic SketchUp tools. If you're new to SketchUp, you can check out the SketchUp YouTube channel. Is a great resource, and you can learn to model stuff like this. Again, this is not advanced modeling that we're doing here. So if we look, our shield is on the ground, and you'll remember that we made it. We have that inch gap in the bottom, so I'm going to use my move tool, click on it. I'm going to move it up like this, and you want to see on the blue axis, so it's sort of sliding up and down. You don't want to push it away from you like this. And we're going to go up. I'm going to type in 1 and press enter, and now it's 1 inch off the ground. And this is going to make it easier for us to draw the little stands. So, all right, let's start drawing the stands. And this is going to be a little bit more freeform, but let's give it a try here. So I'm going to draw a rectangle just in an arbitrary position on the ground here. And if you look in that measurement box, in my case, again, it's in the top of my screen here. I'm going to make this, so right now, as I move this around, you see the rectangle changes size. Right now, it's about 1.5 by 10 3/4. So I'm going to make this actually 0.211, which is the thickness of our material, and I'm going to hit comma. I'm going to say by 8. And so that's going to give us a rectangle that is like, you know, a thin strip of polycarbonate. Then I'm going to use the push-pull tool, which is our 3D tool. I'm going to bring it up. And you can kind of look at the dimension here, and we can actually sort of eyeball it. I'm going to bring this up about 7 inches. So I'm going to hit 7 and press enter. And we've got the beginnings of our stands. So I'm going to jump into making this a component right away, and you'll see why in a second here. So we're kind of jumping the gun, but this will make sense in a few steps here. So I'm going to triple click this. I'm going to make this a component, and we're going to call this a stand, I guess. And on this one, because I drew this one vertically, I'm going to hit set component axes. And if you're familiar with CNC, which you should be, you're going to know about your X, Y, and Z. So in SketchUp, the red axis is X, the green axis is Y, and the blue axis is Z. And for a clean export out of SketchUp, you want this axis rotated in the direction that you would cut the part on the machine. So you can click here. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, there's a small text area that says pick direction for red axis. So I'm going to pick along this direction here. That's going to be my X. And then it says pick direction for green axis. And in my case, I'm going to Mac. It says command equals alternate axis orientation. And so what that means is you can switch the next axis that you select. So I don't want to pick the Y axis. I actually want to pick the blue. So I'm going to hit command. And now it puts me on the blue axis. And I can orient the blue axis up. So I'm going to click again. And now you'll see that the 0 point essentially of this part would be on the table of our machine. So you want the 0 point on the bottom of the part, the way that it would be laid on the machine. The X and Y actually don't matter quite as much, but it's the blue, the origin in the blue, or the Z-axis is important. So we're going to create. And now this is where you got to get a little tricky with the move tool. So I'm going to hit move, and I'm going to snap to the midpoint here. And I'm going to move this over. And I'm actually going to try to get it right on the midpoint. So we'll kind of turn here. There we go. Right on the midpoint of the slot. And then I'm going to move it over a little bit like this. So we've got the thing kind of in the slot. And then I'm going to move it down. And when you're moving something up or down, or left or right, like this, but in this case, we're moving it up or down. If you hold shift, it will lock it on that direction, so it won't move all around like this. So I'm going to move it down a little bit, hold shift. I'm just going to touch the bottom of my part here, kind of like on a corner. And then I'm going to click it again and move it down 1 inch. And so what this has done is it's put this part in the slot and kind of lined it up exactly where I want it. Now, with the move tool still selected, I'm just going to click on the face of this part somewhere and start moving it over to the other slot. But if you look on the bottom of your screen, it says Option equals Copy. This might be Control or Alt if you're on a PC, but I'm going to tap Option on my Mac. I'm just going to hold Shift so it locks on the red axis. And I'm going to touch on my slot over here. And so now I've put this other one over here. Now, you might be thinking, well, hey, these stands don't look like the nice rounded ones that you have here, and there's no slot in them. Why did you go to all this work to lay these out? And the reason why is I typically like to rough things out ahead of time and then add detail as we go along. You might be thinking, well, you're going to have to do it twice because you have 2 copies here. But we don't, and I'll show you why. Components in SketchUp are pretty powerful. So if you have 2 components, whatever you do to one happens to the other one. So we can do twice the amount of work without doing twice the amount of work. So what I'm going to do is double click on this component here. And what you should see is everything else grayed out except for the component that you're working on. If you don't see this for some reason, go to View and go to Component Edit and make sure Hide Rest of Model is not checked off. Okay. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to take my line tool. And I'm going to make a line like this. And then I'm going to go to the other side of my slot, and I'm going to make a line like this. And it's going to snap right to that. You just want to be careful you get it, it right against the material, but it's going to snap there. And that's going to let us, make a line right up against our material, which is important because we made this main shield the correct thickness. Now I'm going to go to View, Component Edit, and I'm going to check off Hide Rest of Model, and you can see what we have here. So I'm going to make this like this, and I'm going to take so now we have kind of 2 faces here, and when you have 2 faces, it will let you push-pull these and push this all the way through. So we have the beginning of our slot. Now, we're not quite done yet. What I like to do with these things is I like to widen out these slots a little bit, but I like to do it in a tricky way. And I'll show you my little trick here. So what I do is I will take the tape measure tool, like we've done before, and I'll establish a line. I'll go up like